I am going to set up this Stambaugh bass. This was a custom job that a gentleman ordered. It's definitely unique, but it is absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. At any rate, I mean, the finish is like, the wood grain is definitely three-dimensional in there. It's gorgeous. But it was one of those deals where I probably wouldn't have made all the same choices, but it was an incredible bargain. At any rate, I'm going to tune it to BEAD. And so I've got to make some adjustments to the nut here. So I've got to make some adjustments to the nut here and just set it up for the proper string gauge. And I apologize, I know I'm going to be struggling to find words here a little bit. I was on the road till 4 a.m. driving back, towing a trailer from Mississippi. But I just wanted to do this part. I've been really itching to get this done, and these nut files arrived while I was away, so I know I'm going to tear into this at an inconvenient time, because that's what I do. But I wanted to talk about it real quick, and then I'm going to go ahead and do some quick recordings as sort of like a baseline, and then compare later. In essence, what I'm doing is, these are the strings that are on there. 45, 65, 85, and 105 are the gauges. And I should have the numbers. I'll put them on the screen. I think the website is stringtensionpro.com, but it's got a pretty nice little calculator in there. Anyway, if it's a substantial difference in string tension, I decided that while making the change, I would go with a balanced string tension kind of approach. And I didn't realize there was a company out there that was already making these string sets. I just kind of ran the numbers and came up with a set that I liked, and was just going to buy the individual strings, enter Callium strings. I believe it used to be Circle K, which makes sense looking at their logo. I don't have any affiliation with these guys, and I've never tried these strings before. What I've got here is 124 gauge for the low B, 94 gauge for the E, 70 for the A, and 53 for the D. And if I remember correctly, the string tensions range between 30 and 32 pounds. It's very consistent across the fretboard. One of the things I'm curious about, and that's what I'm gonna do before really tearing this guy down, I'm gonna tune this back up to standard 4-string tuning. I'm gonna use a pick, and I'm just going to pluck each string just kind of at as consistent an intensity as I can. I'm going to use a direct box. I'm going to flatten out the EQ on the preamp and turn volume on everything up. There'll be no compression, no anything else in the recording. And I'm just going to get the levels of each string open, and then each string at like maybe the 5th fret. Might even do it again at like the 12th fret, just out of curiosity. But I just want to see if there's a variability in volume. And I realize, of course, that there are a lot of other factors. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to truly have kind of a proper control here in this little experiment. But then I'm going to file the nut out, and these weren't perfect, but they're close. This is a 124 string. I've got a 125 file. That's probably about perfect. And then, unfortunately, let's see. I think the E string is going to be great too. I've got a 95, and I want to say this is a 94 gauge. Yep. So there's, 1,000th gap in there. I think even I can't screw that up. The overall string tension is going to go from somewhere in the neighborhood of 180 pounds, I want to say, 175 maybe, somewhere in there, down to about 120, 125, probably closer to 125, but it's substantial difference. So it's going to need a full setup. So I'll be tearing into this in the middle of the night, I'm sure, tonight. That's the plan, and we'll see after I swap out the strings how the volume varies across the strings with a balanced setup. Obviously, it's going to be a lower tuning. There's just a number of variables that are different, but of course there'll be a couple strings overlap there where the gauges will be similar, but the tension's going to be different. You know, frequency response on the pickups. You know, it's not going to be a perfect experiment, but I think it'll be good enough to kind of demonstrate if that's really a factor. I don't really know that it is a factor. I don't know if that's why anybody does it. I'm interested in doing it from kind of a playability standpoint, and I do like the looser tension. Incidentally, I want to make a note that the way that I determined which gauges, because man, Calium has a million different options. I mean, they've got you covered. Not cheap, but I don't plan to be swapping these out every, couple weeks or anything. At any rate, what I did is I have a tendency, especially when I'm recording, I'm not a technically great player. I just enjoy the creative part of making music. I was, taking the notes sharp quite frequently. I adjusted the tension by tuning up until I was noticing that even when I was bearing down pretty good, where I thought was kind of the upper limit of my ham-handed, kind of poor playing, a significant difference in fretting pressure wasn't really making a substantial impact on the tuning or the accuracy of the note. And once I kind of found that place, I put that tuning and scale length and whatnot in the known string gauge here into that String Tension Pro calculator, and I got the tension. And that was kind of my starting point, was I felt like any tension above that, I probably was safe for not mashing down on that sucker so bad to sharpen the note all the time. At any rate, I'm gonna just do some basic thumping. Now, of course, when I come back and do this again on the new setup, I may be thumping a little bit harder or a little bit softer, but what matters is the consistency as I move across the strings, and I'll be doing that one right after the other. I ought to be able to get some fairly good repeatability. At any rate, we'll see how it goes. But again, this may not be the primary reason most people go to this balanced string tension approach. It's not really the primary reason I'm doing it, but it kind of occurred to me, if I wanted to satisfy my curiosity about that, I better do it before I make the change. Alright, so I apologize for all the cuts in that first part. So, here we go. It's time to file the nut down on this thing. I don't have a really clean bench to work on, and I don't want this dude getting all scratched up. So what I'm going to do is nice little pillow. I need reading glasses because I'm getting old. And I'm gonna put basically a yard trash bag down to sort of collect all the little dust there. Gonna tuck that in there like that. Now, I'm not gonna show the whole thing, and I'm definitely gonna fast forward through all this, but that way, got the neck nice and cradled there. I think that'll work. Scoochie my chair a little closer. That's a technical term. Alright, so the gist of it is... Dang. Dropping stuff like crazy here. So I've got the nut files, and I distracted myself before. What I was trying to say is I have pretty much ideal... Man, do not use your teeth. It's just not a good thing to do. So while the 105 or excuse me, the 125 for a 124 string, a 95 for a 94 string. But see, here's where it wasn't ideal. I've got a 65 for a 70. I'm gonna have to kind of hog that thing out a little bit. And then I've got a 50 for a 53. That won't be too bad. From what I've been reading online, about 20 thousandths clearance on this first fret if I'm fretting at the third fret. And so I want to file these guys out to that depth. So I'm going to take my time and go a couple of strokes, pop the string back in there, tune it back up, check it, detune it, pop it back out, a couple more strokes, and I'm just going to go nice and slow because you can cut a little more, but you can't really put it back. Anyway, that's the process. Oh, the only other real trick I think to this thing is you definitely want to follow the track of the string towards the tuner, and you want that angle to be there, because ultimately what you want is you want the high point of the nut to be right there at the edge for the intonation to be exactly correct. Alright, so here we go. I'm going to take just a moment to double check that figure, but I'm pretty sure it's 20 thousandths. Alright, so I'm glad I double checked that. I knew that didn't quite sound right. 22 thousandths. I'm going to take this approach and then check it against the other. So there's two approaches to this. There's the fretted at the third fret and measure the clearance at the first fret, but man, they're talking about like a sheet of paper, you know, all kinds of weird suggestions about that, but none of them are real precise. However, unfretted 22 thousandths. So this is actually pretty helpful because this bass plays so well, and well, that would explain that. Okay, so I'm guessing it's about 20 thousandths as it's set up, and I want to like mimic that. Let's see what we got here. Man, it is right at about, I'm going to say 20 thousandths open. I think that's pretty darn good right there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to have a setup that's consistent with the way the Stambaugh came set up, which is just beautiful. I'm going to go with 20 thousandths at the first fret, nothing fretted. So here's the part where I go into high speed and I just do it. quick note here, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got a little bit of wear on the board here. Man, that is not good playing that super loose. Shouldn't be a problem at 30 to 32 pounds, but I was playing this fourth string tuned down to B, and it was in that 20 pound range, and there was enough slack that I was able to touch the fretboard with the string, and you can see the grooves from the windings. Anyway, as you can tell, even in the fast forward video, I'm taking my time on this guy and going really slow. This file, being the widest, is going to cut the slowest through there. Shouldn't take quite as long to cut the other ones. We'll see how it goes, but I'd rather take my time and do this right. I'm protecting the headstock here from this slack string from rubbing there, and I'm really trying to follow the path of that string. Alright, I'm back at it here. Sure enough, the narrower file is cutting a lot faster, and it's gonna go, I believe, significantly faster on these two. But man, I don't know if this is ebony or that tusk material from Graphtec. I'm not sure, but this nut is just, it is some tough stuff, man. It gets frustrating and it's real tempting to kind of accelerate the process, but it really pays to take your time and go slow. Plus, you don't want to gouge your headstock. I'm getting confident enough to go fairly fast, but I take chances sometimes. And the trick I'm using here, I am just getting that thing in there as flat as I can, and then I'm tapping it to see if I can see any movement at all. I don't know if you can see that. There's still a tiny bit of movement, but I mean, that's probably a couple thousandths right there. So the camera ran out of batteries, and I didn't bother recording the rest anyway because it was just more of the same. Well, here she is, finished. I thought I would try to, with better lighting, see if I could show you what I was talking about earlier with the grain. I believe the top is myrtle, but there's like a depth to that grain. It's incredible. You catch it from different angles and you see different grain structure. It's really incredible. Beautiful wood. At any rate, got the nut filed out for the wider strings, and I went ahead and finished the full setup on it. Adjusted the truss rod, got the bridge, saddle height right, and the intonation correct, and she's good to go. So what I did, and I'm gonna try not to get super bogged down in the details here, but get my little preview thing here so I know, so I can see what's being seen. In Studio One, I just recorded a couple of tracks. Zooming out real quick so you can see what I did each string 10 times, plus let it ring out, 10 times on the A string, let it ring out, 10 times on the D string, let it ring out, 10 on the G. Then I went to the 5th fret and I repeated that, and then I did the same thing after the new setup. Then I looked at each peak and got an average for that set, and then I also calculated the sustain, and here's how I did it. I don't know if there's a better way of doing it, but I just took the peak for this last note, and then I determined how long until the volume reduced by 20 dB. Oh, it's a beautiful day. Detroit Lions are beating the Patriots, and my Dolphins are 3-0. Who'da thunk? Alright, well, I'm going to put the most significant numbers on the screen here at the end to kind of wrap this thing up. Boy, trying to point out the most significant stuff. Up here we have the original setup, and this is the data from the open string testing, and then the fifth fret testing. And then if I scroll down here, I've got the new setup, the BEAD tuning with the fatter strings, the open string setup, and then the fifth fret, or the open string data and the fifth fret data. And the gray columns are the sustain data, and the white columns are just the peak intensity. So, of note, on the summary, I guess, of the open string original setup, kind of traditional medium gauge standard tuning on a 34-inch scale, the spread on the volumes was 4.65. So the hottest signal was a minus 16.38 dB. The weakest signal was a minus 21. Interestingly, the weakest volume was on the tightest string, the D string. It's 47, take a peek over here, 47.89 pounds. And yet the longest sustain was that tight string. That makes sense to me, but I think it's interesting that the lowest peak was on that string. So as far as consistency, which is what I was interested in, 4.65, a pretty big spread, 4.65 dB between the hottest and the weakest signals, and a 2.1 second sustain difference. So again, what I did there was from the peak on that 10th note each time, I just let it ring out, and then I just determined how many seconds for a 20 dB decay. So 5.2 seconds on the E string, 5.9 seconds on the A string, 7.1 on the D, so that's that tight string, and then 5. So the extreme spread there was 2.1 seconds. And the average sustain was 5.8. On the 5th fret, well, we'll come back to that. Let's go down to the new setup and compare the open string data. So what I was kind of hoping for was more consistent volume, and there's a bunch of factors there, I know, and I'm not saying this is always going to be the case based on your setup, but the spread was only 1.77 versus 4.65 up here. That's a substantial difference, and the hottest signal 18.02 dB, the weakest was 19.79, and they were just much more consistent. In fact, interestingly, they went in order. All right, so the extreme spread on the sustain was 2.8 seconds, and while that's a little higher than the 2.1 second sustain spread here, the average is also higher, and so as a percentage it's probably not that much difference. There was 7.9 seconds of sustain using that methodology versus 5.8. I mean, that's a pretty big difference. So onto the 5th fret data. I gotta look at that again real quick. A little bit bigger spread. Interestingly, they were the opposite. The original setup, there was only a 2.2 dB spread. The new setup, there was a 3.1 dB spread. Not a radical difference, but it is a difference, and it's interesting. However, the sustain, 2.2 second spread with the original setup, and only a 1.05 second spread. And also of note, the average decay time was 4 seconds with the original setup, and 4.96 seconds, so almost a second more. Well, 9/10, roughly 9/10 of a second more. So I don't know, I guess that's the most interesting aspect of it, is that for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the bigger gauge strings or the fact that I would think it would decay a little faster, but there are a number of factors. If you got an obvious reason why that's the case, I'd be happy for you to share that in the comments. But It's interesting that the decay times are longer. The sustain is longer on the new setup with the looser strings. It's just interesting that the longest sustain in the original setup was on the tightest string. I find that interesting. Anyway, I guess that's enough about the data. All in all, I'm really pleased with the way it plays. I think the balanced string tension just suits me. It may not be great for everyone. There could be some downsides that I just haven't realized or discovered, or they don't apply to the type of playing techniques that I use. If you've got some thoughts about that, definitely share that in the comments. I would like to learn a little bit more about that. I'm real pleased with the way it plays. I like the fat strings, and the looser strings just kind of appeal to me. It does seem to resist me sharpening the notes by pressing a little too hard. I haven't really had any kind of problems with that. I kind of spot check some notes in some playing that I've recorded, and I've been pretty pleased with the consistency there of the tuning. So that was one of the things I was concerned about, and I guess my strategy for figuring out a tension lower limit, I guess that worked out pretty good, because I kind of came up with a lower limit at upper 20s, like 28 pounds, if I recall correctly, was what I calculated. And then I found this string set from Callium and ran the numbers and got the 30 to 32 pounds. So thank you for watching. This is a brand new channel. I have no idea exactly what's going to come out of it. I have a lot of interests that I definitely want to explore with it. I'm definitely going to ramble a lot and figure things out and talk through things. If you're the kind of person that gets interested in some of this kind of stuff, it's a great opportunity to share your thoughts. I definitely want to keep these comments live and going, and I don't have an ego about this kind of stuff. I try things because I find it interesting, and sometimes I do dumb things, as it turns out. But for the most part, as long as there was something to be gained from it, if I take the time to record something like this, I'll go ahead and post it. But I wanted to explore this while I was in the process of reconfiguring that bass, and I'm glad that I did. It was pretty interesting stuff. Also, I definitely plan to do some tool reviews. I do a lot of projects for fun, electronics projects, and I'm certainly not a craftsman, but I like to build things. And so I built the desk here in the studio, and I built my vocal booth, and those were pretty interesting projects. And so I'll probably, in the future, I'll probably document anything like that I do. And the tool reviews, I know there's guys out there that are going to be reviewing them more from the contractor side of things, a pro perspective, but I'll definitely be doing a different perspective on that. It'll absolutely be do-it-yourselfer centric, if that makes sense. Anyway, thanks, and do the like and subscribe thing, please, and have a great one.